Yes, president of the Women's Global Initiative. Also joining her will be Adam Rubinson of Deloitte, and then Erin Horne McKinney, founder of Black Female Founders, and the lovely Debra Langford of Advancing Black Pathways with JPMorgan Chase. Marcia, I will now turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this great panel on hacking or to hack racism. We have been dealing with a lot of things in our country, even prior to the exponential rise of police brutality on the bodies of Black men and women specifically. We have been dealing with the demon of racism since the first slave ship reached the shores of America. We know through our sociologists and other people studying race that race is a social construct. In other words, it's not something that can be scientifically proven, but has used science against people of non-white origin. This racism demon has been used to divide our country as we see now. It has been used biblically to justify the undermining of the humanity, especially Black people and other ethnicities as well. This demon of racism has found its way into the shores of our American government, where even K Street in the District of Columbia proves the injustices against the others. So I'm happy today to moderate this esteemed panel will help us to get away from the normalcy of our understanding of what race is and to explain on how we can get further to a shore of equality and justice, not only in America, but in the world. So I welcome you to this wonderful conversation where we are going to hack racism. And what is funny is that I love it that it's partnered with MIT because human beings are wired individuals. And what we cannot become is artificial intelligence for racism. In other words, we cannot use the narrow lens of government agencies or some social activities to inscribe or describe who we are as human beings in this fellow global citizenry in which we live. So I welcome you today, and I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists, Adam Rubinson of Government Relations from Deloitte, Ms. Erin Horne McKinney, founder of the Black Female Founders, and my special good friend, Debra Langford, Advancing Black Pathways to JPMorgan Chase. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this party started. What do you think is fueling the racism machine the most here in America? Let me start that in addressing you, Erin, as the Black female founder. What do you think that is and why that is? Is Erin not with us? Okay, I see too that we have Ms. April Ryan joining us. Good morning, April. All right, since I cannot connect with Erin right now, once you get this conversation started.
Good morning, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. So let's lay out the question again, and I'll be happy to respond. Marcia?
Yes, please do.
Lay out the question again so I can respond, because I was not.
What do you think is fueling the racism machine the most here in America?
Okay, so that, Marcia, as you know, and all the work that you've done, we have to look at various points of our existence in this nation. And if you talk about now, we can talk about now. If you talk about before, we can talk about before. But what I believe is at the very base of it, from all of my studies, from sitting in that unique perch that I've been blessed to sit in for 23 years as a White House correspondent for the American Urban Radio Networks, I believe it's people feeling that, one, that they are not touched, that they are left out. And Doug Wilder, the former governor of the state of Virginia, said something so poignant for my first book, The Presidency in Black and White, My Up-Close View of Four Presidents and Race in America. He said, when people, and I'm paraphrasing, when people have pocketbook issues, when there's something wrong with their pocket, that's when you see the ugly head of racism rise up. And we're seeing that today. We saw it yesterday. And we saw it hundreds of years ago. Remember, our existence in this nation is 401 years plus now. And much of the wealth in this nation was built off the free labor, the backs of Black people, Africans, and that dealt with money. If we look at the 50s and 60s, the marches, the sit-ins, et cetera, it was all about, we saw the bus boycott. It struck a chord about money. To sit in because we weren't treated properly. Race and money have this strange connection, but it's a connection that really matters. And today, I say the same thing. What we're seeing is this president playing to the forgotten man. And who is the forgotten man in America? For his idea, the forgotten man is the white man who is not feeling like they're connected, like they don't have what they are supposed to have. Whatever that supposed to is, whatever that definition is, it remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, racism, each generation has had to deal with racism. We've been here for 401 years, and we have to figure this out. And one of the reasons why we have issues with racism is because we are not plugged into every segment of society to change the dynamic, to make sure that we are on an even playing field. The playing field has not been even, it's never been even, and we're hopeful that it will become equal and level.
All right, thank you so much, April, for getting that started. Adam, would you like to add to the conversation or the question?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, MIT and Black Tech Matters, for inviting me here today. I'm really so humbled and honored to be on this panel with the rest of you. So Marcia, I think that what I bring here is sort of the lens of a technologist. And I think using the word racism machine is a very apt word, because I think of racism as a technology. And by that, what do I mean by a technology? I mean, a technology is simply a manner of accomplishing a task or objective using processes, methods, or knowledge created for that objective. And so I see that, I agree, it's all about money. 1619 couldn't happen unless the groundwork was already laid. And the question is why? Why was the groundwork laid? Why were they creating these joint stock companies by royal charter for colonialism and for slavery? And I believe it's because the technology of racism was created by these elite business interests hundreds of years ago to enable those things. So what was the problem they were trying to solve? What was the purpose of this? If all they cared about was making money, why did they do this? I think that when you look at what moral psychologists, how they often talk about the notion that we all have in our DNA through natural selection a tremendous capacity for human compassion. So think of it as a human compassion gene that we're wired with. In order to generate tremendous profits at very low cost, in order to create the machine of slavery, you have to bypass that compassion gene. So that's why the technology was created. It's why they created the intellectual construct of race and all of the methods to indoctrinate the ideas about human inequality and to create those structures to keep bolstering the machine and to make us unmindful of its reality. So that was absolutely essential. And so I think of it almost like a software virus in the human psyche that was then passed on from generation to generation. You know, sort of like what Dr. Ibram Kendi talks about when he says that all of us, black and white, were stamped from the very beginning and spend most of our lives not even realizing we hold these ideas, nor recognizing when we promote these racist ideas. So I'm really happy. I think it's apropos that MIT is involved in this, because from an IT terminology standpoint, we talk of technologies being sunsetted when they become obsolete. But after the end of colonialism and slavery, this technology of racism has never been sunsetted. Instead, like a computer virus, it was executed to replicate itself by modifying other computer programs and inserting its own code. And so when we think about what is fueling a racism machine, certainly it's easy to point to Donald Trump and to point to people who are just cartoon racists. But in a way, it's almost a distraction, because what creates a President Trump? I believe that you have to go to the heart of what this technology is and how we sunset it. And it's, you know, it is propagating racist ideas. It's creating defensiveness when people talk about white privilege or, you know, et cetera. This defensiveness that prevents us from having a lack of awareness. I think it really comes down to a lack of awareness and a lack of mindfulness. And so I'm happy to talk more about how we eradicate the machine and how we sunset this technology, because in a way, as awful as Donald Trump is and as terrible and what he's doing to this country, it's, in my view, it's more of a symptom than a cause. And I have to get at the heart of what is creating this technology. So I'll stop there, and I have more to say later when we talk about what we do to eradicate and sunset technology.
You're absolutely right. As I said, I believe in the opening that human beings are computers, basically. We are wired. We have this electromagnetic energy that's going on. And we have the defense mechanisms, which you spoke of too, right? To which inform us either to be an apathetic or empathetic individual. So this is when you talk about what is happening in the American political landscape, how this embodiment of hate is showing itself out, which exponentially increased the rise of racism and the active racisms in the hearts of minds of our fellow citizens of the United States is a very scientific study that we're hoping to address now to turn into policy. But I want to turn now to Debra Langford to bring you into this conversation, Debra, and to ask you the question, what do you think is fueling racism, the racism machine today? Especially in your industry. I know you're out there in LA and Hollywood. Yes. We know about the white Oscars phenomena. I know that you've been in media for a very long time, but even now with JPMorgan, JPMorgan and Chase, can you add to this conversation?
Well, of course, I'm excited to be here, and I am honored to be here with my sister, my dearest, dearest person, Dr. Marcia Dyson, and all of the panelists. And Angel, thank you for your vision on this. I'm coming to you as the head of business development for Advancing Black Pathways with JPMorgan Chase. But Marcia, in your introduction, you certainly acknowledged my experience and career in media and entertainment. And clearly that is an important industry because it's shaping images. We know that images can impact, you know, your opinions, right? And so as I was a creative executive going through Hollywood, and that's when we met, I certainly was oftentimes the only one in the room. And when I had the chance to move to Time Warner to eradicate that and to take a job to identify top diverse executives at senior levels, not at the pipeline level, not at the college level, but at the I have a seat at the table level. That was the brainchild of Dick Parsons at the time, the CEO, because he, African-American male, knew that there was talent out there. There is an abundant amount of talent out there, but you have to develop the strategies to not only find them, but when you get them into the organization, how are you creating a culture and a climate to keep them? We used to talk about it makes no difference if we have a revolving door. I'm super proud that when I was at Time Warner, over 100 executives came in the door and one left out of the door in 5 years. That's huge. Here's the problem. It wasn't a sustainable situation because it didn't continue, right? People move on. We absolutely understand that. I moved on to work for our sister, Paula Madison at NBC Universal, but it wasn't backfilled, right? And the other companies didn't say, now that's working. We think we'll do it too, right? For whatever reasons. And so I think that as we talk about the challenges of racism on the inside game, right, in the corporate game, you have to have intentionality. You have to also have initiatives that can be sustainable, because when you see the investment in the initiative, that's why it works. And I think my entire career of 25 years in media and entertainment, people don't do the math, and my stop in academia where I was at USC in charge of business, the business school diversity strategies, has led me to this, right? America's largest bank. Having the bold courage from the top, from Jamie Dimon, right? Talking to Tashonda Brown Duckett one day, saying that he wanted to do more for the Black community, knowing that we are under indexing on every level that you see. And that conversation with the CEO of JPMorgan Chase's consumer bank was, let's create something. And we did, they did, advancing Black pathways. I'm happy to talk more about it. But when I think about your question about racism and the challenges, it's because you don't have, there's not enough bold moves to say that this is our plan, our program, we're going to invest in it in the way that we invest in any other thing that we measure success. That has to be in corporate America, and that has to be in academia, right? My 5 years at USC and being in the business school, meeting a lot of great colleagues across top business schools, including MIT, you know, there needs to be a lot of investment in how does the faculty look, not just how do the students look.
Absolutely. And we know that in the academy, especially students who go to the, we call it privileged institutions of higher education, they don't necessarily have to be Ivy League schools, but the problems that they have, I mean, up until this point of the protests that we have now, that we know that many Black students and students in colors in institutions of higher education have faced racism. We who send them to those institutions celebrated and thinking they have come into the shores of success and stability and have given this privilege, but we found that once they're in those so-called citadels of unsafety, that they are victims of racism. So we have to talk about the academy much more in its racial divide as well. And thank you so much, Debra, for that. But not only as a Black woman do we have the problem of race, we also have the problem of gender. And as a Black woman, we have a double indemnity angst against us. And I know that LeBron James tweeted out on his social media this past week with the injustice against, we felt for Breonna Taylor, that the most disrespected woman in America, or the person, is the Black woman. So Erin, I want you now to talk about not only race, but gender in the context of what you think is fueling this machine called racism in America specifically. Erin McKinney.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Angel, for inviting me as well. I'm Erin Horne McKinney, and I am the founder and CEO of Black Female Founders, which is a global membership organization for women-led tech entrepreneurs, firms, as well as female tech leaders throughout the Black diaspora. To your point, Marcia, this was actually a really hard week, I think, you know, not just for Black women, but just even, you know, for Black leaders. I was on a call earlier this week with some counterparts for this organization that formed earlier this year called the Black Innovation Alliance, which is a recent pulling together of Black tech ecosystem builders. And as leaders, you know, we were having a hard time talking about how do we lead in these moments when you feel very discouraged, when you feel like the value of life around Black women is not something that's valued in this country, even though we are huge contributors on so many levels. And our organization exists for the mere reason that, especially in the technology space, what we were seeing is that when there are conversations around inclusion, especially in tech, it is often answered with white women, or in some cases, Black men. And so the organization was formed several years ago to really encourage and create the space and hold space to talk about the issues and barriers specific to Black female founders, but also around how our voice could and contribute to really making and shaping what the world looks like in the future. And I think, Debra kind of spoke to this a little bit in her background. My background is also as a communication scientist, and I think a lot about media imagery and media ownership. And when you look at who are the wealthiest Black women in the country today, most of them have come from, which is Oprah, Sheila Johnson, and others, Kathy Hughes. They all come from media ownership backgrounds, right? And that's what media looked like previously. So what will it look like in the future? To me, really is about making sure that we have ownership when it comes to technology and creating true generational wealth in our community by having that participation on a higher level. And as I'm sure many people may be aware of the numbers in venture capital, where out of all the billions of dollars that are spent in venture capital, less than 3% go to women and minorities, right? And specifically for Black female tech founders, it's less than 1%. In a study done by Digital Undivided, it pointed out that on average, a successful Black female tech founder receives funding, and depending on the year, because it's in their third year of producing that study, it on average is around $40,000 to $47,000. Successful Black female tech entrepreneurs, that's kind of funding that she receives and is invested in. Whereas the average failing white male tech founder receives an average of $1.2 million, okay? And so the thing is how can we truly expect to have a unicorn from the Black female tech community if we don't have some of these barriers taken away, which includes, it's not just financial, although that's a huge part, but it's also about social capital and just being invited into the conversation, and not because of a photo op, okay? It's about really, truly investing in these companies and believing in these companies. And what we've seen, there's a wonderful Black female tech founder who brought a lot of attention to even the algorithms and the things that we use in facial recognition and in voice recognition, that when we don't include us in our thinking, that you actually make faulty technology that is not inclusive, right? And it's interesting how much, even as technology is being built, women and people of color are not included in the conversation. And it just, to me, is it's not just about what's right, although it is, right? But it's also about, just from a business case, right? If you want to talk about as a business and your bottom line, why would you not want the best possible innovation, the best possible ideas to come to the table? And I'll also add that I think what's so interesting to me about innovation is that some of the best innovation really comes out of survival, right? And I think what we've seen this past week is some of the strongest survivors in this country have been Black women, and specifically descendants of African slaves in this country, right? Black women in this country historically have been treated less than, devalued. We know even when it comes to the wage, we receive, $67 or 67 cents to the dollar per our white male counterparts, right? And it's just to me, it's like, no matter how many facts are presented, no matter how much we show our value, the fact of the matter is that we still are not given a fair shot, and we are still not, the playing field has not been leveled for us to participate fully and wholly. And it's to the disadvantage of our country when we're not included.
All right, thank you so very much for that, Erin. Our next question to pose to our panelists is, how much of an effect do you think the racism machine has on our society as far as the direction that we're heading? And we look at what is happening now in the streets, it seems as if we haven't gotten very far on this trajectory of injustices toward African Americans, whether in the field of technology or other areas. So I want to talk to you guys about that and ask you, you know, since we are forced to look at the systemic and scientific backdrop of racism in our society, do you think that we are utilizing the information that we're getting from algorithms that are used sometimes against us, right? Especially in the technological world, we know that there's ways in which we can monitor and track and trace what especially African-American people are basically, I don't know if it's thinking or doing, how we purchase, and how they can be used for consumerism, but how can it be also used against us as well in technology? Can somebody, you know, I want to just throw that out if it's discombobulated. I know that you can untangle it. And April, you know, you're now in that hot seat. I'd like for you to consider that question. And how do we disrupt that, April?
You're muted, April.
They have to unmute me. Okay, they had to unmute me. So here's what's going on. We're now getting the algorithms from a lot of different sectors. I remember during the Obama years, we were hearing that we were not represented in Silicon Valley in numbers that we should be. They are starting to move us there. We're starting to hear about more of us. But the problem is that we have to scream, we have to stomp, we have to hear from the inside. And part of the problem is that we are not en masse a part of the game. Not only be a part of the game, we have to own the game. And Debra, I see you're nodding your head. And you know, like on Wall Street, you know, how many of us are in the stock market game? You know, we have to learn that this is not just about this is for them. We are a part of we the people. And we have to learn that we have to get into these nooks and crannies that other groups are making their money with. We have to start opening our minds to say, hey, I want to get in this. You know, housing, real estate, technology, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. We have to be in these spaces and places that make money. Money and race, again, are conjoined twins. And if we start playing this, we don't have to worry about being a community with the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. In 2020, we're still screaming that we want our piece. We don't need to keep saying, I want my piece. Get in there. The doors are open. We have to find ways to get in there, not only be at the table. As Shirley Chisholm said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I want my folding chair, my kids to have a folding chair, not only have a folding chair, but I want to start owning the table. So that's what we have to start looking at, preparing ourselves, not to be the victims, but the victor, preparing ourselves to go in there and start doing what they do. We don't hear other communities crying out like we do. They understand what it is. Race and money are conjoined twins. We got to figure out how to separate them to be separate and equal.
In other
Marcia,
words,
can I join in on that?
oh, absolutely, Debra.
Perfect. Hi, April. I'm gonna make this a thread that everybody. I feel like this is a family conversation that's going to be broadcast out. So I'm just going.
Yes, Debra. Yes, Debra. Preach.
That's what I'm gonna do. April Ryan, do you remember when I introduced you at the Essence Music Festival to Shonda Brown Duckett, and I did my big drum beat, and I said the CEO of JPMorgan Chase Consumer Bank? You stopped and said, "What? Why don't
Lost
I
my
know
mind.
you?"
Lost my
Right?
mind.
You said, why don't I know you? Right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a company that has a person, not only at the seat at the table, as Beyonce and Jay says, what's better than a billionaire once, twice. She's been a CEO twice and now has been elevated to the operating committee of JPMorgan Chase, the first Black female ever. There is, I want to connect this with a thread, right? There should be, let's all understand, and we have something called Advancing Black Pathways, right? We're focused on careers, education, and wealth, financial wealth. We want to be that bank of choice. We know that there are people, we have them at the bank, hint, hint, this week. So when you talk about education, Marcia, when you talk about that part being part of the equalizer and careers, right? Because we know with financial health comes, you know, regular income, which includes, because this is about health as well, includes health insurance, includes options so that you can take care of your family, right? But when we're talking about focusing on education, right, we have a bold commitment to hire 4,000 Black interns in 5 years, right? 2019, we were tracking, even with COVID, we're going to hit that number. Any company can do that. You don't have to say 4,000, but just say more than you were doing before. How about that, right? Part of, Erin, when you were talking about wealthy Black women, let's also include Janice Bryant Howroyd, not from media, but who started her own company of Act One with $1,500. Act One is $2 billion in revenue, and she is a proud Aggie pride, North Carolina A&T, an HBCU, right? That's why we have focused a lot of our work on celebrating and inviting HBCU students into the bank, right? So these are the things that should not be exclusive to our bank. You know, we're letting everybody know what we do. Come on, you know, challenge us, right? And it should not be just to banking. It should be to every industry, right? Those are some of the things that eradicate it. Because if you don't see leaders that look like you, right? When you go into the street, when you make other decisions based on bias, which everybody has, what, you know, to your point, Marcia, you've talked about we're wired, right? What's the data in? Am I seeing people who look like people on this, who lead, who own, right? Who are wealthy, who are prosperous, right? Last thing I'll say in data, one of the things that we are doing is advancing Black entrepreneurs. Why? January 1, there were 2.3 million Black businesses in this country. Because of COVID, June 1, 42% less. Percentage, what does that mean? 450,000 less Black businesses because of COVID, right? Because they were single proprietor and they had 2 to 3 weeks of reserve left, right? Those are the things we got to fix. Why? Because Black entrepreneurs have 12 times more net worth than non-entrepreneurs. So that means that group of the 12 times more, 450,000 of them are not there. We've got to talk about these things. That should be part of the hackathon, right? What do we do? How do we pivot when a shift happens?
We're going to make that shift, and both what you're basically saying, Deborah, and to April, to not having this notion of victimization. We who were once chattel and collateral for other people's growth have now to have to use capital for our own growth and get into the game, right? But I want to throw it back to you, Adam. Can you talk about how what appears to be neutral technology, like facial recognition, for instance, it is used to hurt people of color? Talk about the role of race in science in our society specifically for us, please. Thank you.
Sure. Well, there's no question that science is just one of many, many that are part of the racism machine. You know, you mentioned facial recognition. You know, the examples go on. And I think that what we have to think about is how do we sunset not just these symptoms, but how do we sunset the underlying technology? And so one of the things that comes to mind as I was listening to Debra is that there are a lot of organizations that for many years have been doing what I would call check the box. And what's great to hear is that Debra's organization is definitely well beyond that. I think that at the heart of check the box is that people are they're confusing the notion of not being a racist with the notion that anti-racism is an action and requires continuous mindfulness. So when I talk about how we sunset the technology, I think that removing defensiveness, creating self-awareness, practicing mindfulness, continually promoting anti-racist policies. I mean, it's kind of like this. In my life, I love my wife. I want her to be happy. I know what the things are that make her happy. but I'm not always mindful. Sometimes my head is on automatic pilot. And so even though I may have a good intention, if I simply check the box and I'm not continuously mindful, I'm not going to do what's needed. I'm not going to take those continuous efforts. So what I believe is that, you know, taking organizations like mine, Deloitte, where, you know, we have many great programs. We make tremendous investments in this very activity. But I think what's changed most recently in large organizations is this notion that it's not enough to say you have a program. It's not enough to invest some money and then say, we're done, we've done it, we're not racist, therefore we can move on. There's a notion that in everything we do, we really must be mindful of the fact that anti-racism has to be a continuous activity. That's the only way we sunset it.
Yeah, absolutely. You invoked your wife, and of course I want to invoke my husband, Michael Eric Dyson, as everyone knows, has written many books around race. So I remember Michael talking about how most people thought with the election of President Obama that we lived in a post-racial society, but Michael, I'm going to read his quote, said, "We should not be a post-racial, seeking to get beyond the uplifting meanings and edifying registers of Blackness. Rather, we should be post-racist, moving beyond cultural fascism and vicious narratives of racial privilege and superiority that tear at the fabric of e pluribus unum." And I want to go a little bit back to you, Erin, on thinking about that in a post-racial society, especially once again as it relates to Black women. How do we leverage not only Black female wealth, but our social and political capital after seeing Breonna Taylor disrespected and disregarded? And how do we make certain that Black female voices and faces are heard and seen not only in the tech world, but in general society as well? What we are experiencing, both Debra, and I think you, Adam, spoke to organizations or your corporations, and right now we see an outpouring of this financial love from corporations and 500 level, right? And I call that Black Christmas, but I contend that Santa Claus won't always be in the ghetto. So once those corporations take their finances out, right? How do we stabilize that, especially for Black women, Erin?
That's a great question, and one that I thought a lot about, because at the end of the day, you're right. This what we're seeing right now in the infusion of capital that's being deployed in our communities right now is not sustainable. And the unfortunate thing is when you do these short-term programs, sometimes you create opportunities that obviously will not last very long because they're not sustainable. They can't scale because what's going to happen when that funding is gone, right? But the other thing that you're seeing is there's these big announcements about funding, but the actual amount of money that's being deployed specifically to Black businesses or to Black organizations is actually not that large of an amount because it's being spread so thin that it's really not creating huge impact. I think going back to April and Debra's points earlier that I think is really important, you know, and especially as it relates to this hackathon, are a couple of things. One, it's about as these companies are being built, really thinking about your leadership and making sure that you include diverse leadership and specifically Black women on your founding teams, and more importantly, on your board of directors. The thing that we're seeing, some of these companies that have made these commitments, it's great, you know, and the community appreciates it. However, to me, it's inauthentic, because at the end of the day, if your leadership of your Fortune 500 company is still lacks diversity, if your board still lacks diversity, and these are where the real decisions are made, these are where the opportunities are, which can be, by the way, can be inclusive. And it really is frustrating to me. And we even saw, you know, recently the apology from Wells Fargo CEO about not being able to find Black talent. That is ludicrous to me. You know, when you have, as somebody, and Debra, I just have to say, as a proud Howard alum, HU, you know.
HU?
That's right, an HBCU alum. But when I look at, and I'm surrounded by absolute excellence, not just across our HBCUs, but we do have Black leaders who have gone to Ivy Leagues for all of their degrees, undergraduate and graduate, and have been extremely successful and still are not seen or valued as peers in the leadership world. That's unacceptable. And I'm tired of the excuses where, however, you will see white male counterparts who either one, don't even have a degree, who have worked their way up because of nepotism and things like that, and are given opportunities that members of our community are not given. It's just no longer, you know, just even from a business case, it doesn't make sense. Why would you have someone leading organizations or being on boards who lack the true experience, and more importantly, aren't even reflective on at a bare minimum of the population that you serve? A lot of these organizations that I'm talking about, even if you just do a basic, if let's say every single consumer in the US, then at least your board or your leadership should have a percentage that matches the Black population, the minority population, the female population of this country. And so, you know, looking at, you know, ways that especially as Black leaders, that we can leverage our the opportunities that we create or do have for those, because there is an issue, and I'm just going to be transparent here, is that sometimes when you do get certain leaders, Black leaders that are put into places and spaces, they accept the fact that they're the only one, and there's no bringing up anyone else behind them, and that is unacceptable as well. So to me, you know, how we leverage ourselves and our capital is that, one, taking the opportunity to leverage your exposure and your social capital to bring others along. Personally, even me, with the little wealth that I have as a Black woman and a Black leader who has predominantly been on the in the public sector, I invest specifically in Black female companies. And I make sure that, you know, I am that friends and family round that a lot of our founders do not have. But it's also, you know, when I can't financially contribute, I definitely make sure that I give access as it relates to my social capital. I make those introductions. I do not guard that to the point that I am suffocating our community by not giving breath and giving life and giving opportunity to others the same way that people have shown me. So I think it's our responsibility as Black leaders to make sure that we're creating space and giving a platform to others so that they can lead and they can have experience and respect the fact that there are a lot of opportunities that exist today for Black female founders that were not there when I was a Black female tech founder first coming up. But I'm not going to stop and say, well, you know, I didn't have that opportunity, so I'm not going to help somebody else. I really feel like at the end of the day, I am so proud of the young women that are coming up behind me, and I am you know, I always push on people and assert that we have to be phenomenal mentors to this next generation, because honestly, they're showing us up right now in the sense that they are not taking any nonsense. They are standing up for what they believe in, and they will not be silenced, where a lot of us have been muted and silenced for so long that it's almost second nature that we expect that. So I'm so proud of this younger generation who is using their voice in an amazing way to make change.
Thank you so very much. And about mentorship, I have traveled the world, and I don't like the solo journey, and always borrowing from the play Hamilton, want to make sure that our people were in the room where it happens with me. And one of my great mentees is Angel Rich, is the reason why I'm here today. And I learned so much from her. And talking about, you know, the corporate chain of events and how we need to look at the absence of us, the raisins and the oatmeal, so to speak. We also have to look at our government, to the lack thereof. I remember that Dr. King had his heated breath on the neck of LBJ to say, you know, when LBJ said, the president said, "You got to make me do it." Dr. King was right there in the White House making him do it, right? To make these civil rights attributes that we have now to utilize as tools for our angst against injustices to happen. But Debra, I want to talk to you. Can you speak to us about democratizing capital? Dr. King said that justice is better than charity, right? How do we bring about this really genuine economic justice and equity to address the systemic issues that don't seem to disappear despite continued protests? How do we go from collateral to capital still? Because that's at the end of the day that not only would dictate how we would become collectively as African American people here in America, but for future generations to come as well, to take advantage of somewhat a quasi reparations now, but how do we make it more institutional, and will it become policy in some form or fashion?
Absolutely. And clearly one of my must-dos after this will be to get with Erin, because I want to talk about how we can support Black female founders and what we do. You know, again, it's embedded in what we do, Marcia. We launched Advancing Black Entrepreneurs, right? Partnering with 4 organizations, including Black Enterprise Magazine, a Black-owned, you know, family enterprise. Let me say this. When the late, great Earl Graves had the idea and the vision for Black enterprise, there was only one bank that supported him, and that was Chase, right? So we have been in the game of founders, right? We have been in the game of supporting people. We have, in Advancing Black Pathways, 13 cities. One is Detroit. Through our entrepreneurs of color, we helped Melissa Butler in Detroit launch Lip Bar, right? So part of, Marcia, the answer is giving the insights and the information to entrepreneurs so that they have more than 3 weeks of reserve left. Giving them the, as T likes to say to Shonda Brown Duckett, give you the answers to the tests. We want you to know this. We want you to have your loan applications and everything ready so that when you come in and you have that financial freedom of being an entrepreneur. Remember I said Black entrepreneurs have 12 times more net worth than non, right? Those are the things that we have to do. And let me say this. You know, I want everyone who's listening to us, be intentional with what you do, with your actions and with your money, right? You talked about it. You know, if you look and you see wherever you have your money or wherever you spend your money and they don't have anybody who looks like you, they don't have people at the senior leadership level, that's not it. And when we talk about don't be the only one, when Shonda Brown Duckett got elevated to the operating committee, even before that, she made a bold move. She had 4 people have expanded portfolios, and 3 were Black. You see what I'm saying? One person who was running Advancing Black Pathways, Sekou Kalen, has now moved to be the head of the Northeast, where he has 10,000 people reporting to him, 1,000 branches. What I'm saying is not just a blatant commercial for us. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it can be done when you have people who have a seat at the table, who are comfortable, authentic, strategic, and successful. They can say, oh yeah, when I promote, yeah, I'm okay with them looking like me. Yeah, you're right, that's fine. So we need to do that. We have to have an inside-outside game. We have to figure out the ways to support people with their dreams and their visions, especially technology. We know that that can be an equalizer. And I'm going to go back to the purpose of the hackathon. I'm hoping that when the problems are hacked, there's a lot of solutions that can be replicated across a lot of industries. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take strategies that are sustainable, that the company commits to, and there's leadership in the company, and people are saying, yeah, I'm watching you. I see who you have. And because you have it, I think I'll move something over there, or I think I want to work there.
We have, I know we're running out of time. We have a lot of questions. I would like the panelists to look at some of those questions, but I want to throw out one before we end. Can technological developments offer a solution to the racism problem? Do you really think that it can? And can you briefly answer that for us?
Sure. Well, it depends what we mean by technology. If we mean it in the classic sense, it's only one part of this. I mean, you know, one of the reasons why I joined Deloitte many years ago was because I saw it as a place that would support my passion about focusing on inclusive innovation. So that was all about access to capital, access to mentoring, access to networks for entrepreneurs of color. And I was very happy about that. I mean, I was excited about the fact that Deloitte was behind that. But what I've come to realize, and what Deloitte has come to realize, is that yes, it's so important to put people in the boardrooms and put people in these, you know, key roles and to make this investment. But it has to be something that you institutionalized. And so when I think of hacking, a hackathon, I think of what are the things that we can do to help organizations and help individuals constantly be mindful of this. Naming it as a value, educating people, integrating it in everything we do, programs, meetings, recruitment, communication, mentoring, tying it to performance management, understanding the metrics and leveraging those metrics, and from a technology perspective, using analytics. I think if we use analytics and we understand the metrics and we tie it to performance management, and we constantly integrate it into whatever we do. So it's not just, oh, this is the time when we're going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. But diversity, equity, and inclusion are a natural part of everything we do as organizations and as individuals. Then we have a way of moving forward. And so that's what I'm encouraging and I'm excited about this hackathon, because if people can think about that, how to make it mindful, that would be going a long way toward where we need to be.
All right, thank you. Do you have something else to add to this? I don't know if she's still here with us. April? She's with us. Angel, I would like to hear your voice on this. I mean, as the originator of it, I know that you've been thinking about this conference for a very long time. In many aspects, you've been working on different events up until this point. I think it would be a short-sighted of me not to have your voice on this, since you have given us a voice and a platform. Can we have some words from you as we end this session, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we want to make sure we take a question or two from the audience. You know, this panel has truly been amazing. I'm over here torn between taking notes and trying to manage everything. So it's like it's been really really grateful to have all of you, all of the panelists as well as the participants. And as you know, I think that there are many facets to racism. I kind of look at it as a past, present, and future perspective. The past, understanding where we have come from, how this country has been built, but also looking at the present state that we're in, and different things like George Floyd and different circumstances that have recently happened. But then the point of this whole discussion is to look towards the future and how can we have solutions that solve for public health and other things that are facing us. So I kind of see so many aspects here. And to also kind of transition and take a question from the audience, someone asked in the Q&A about toxic work culture, and I want to throw that out to the panel because that is very true. You know, even myself have experienced that in various different circumstances, and that's oftentimes why African Americans and Black people might go off and start their own companies, because they don't feel welcome in these cultures and in these environments. Sort of like what Debra was talking about earlier, how JPMorgan Chase has created Advancing Black Pathways. So how do you think that racist, toxic work environments impacts our health? And what are some things that we can do to help mitigate that?
That's an open question to anyone, whether it's...
That's an open question.
Okay.
I guess I'll start with Adam. Adam, do you have any thoughts on that? And then we can go to Erin.
Sure. Well, I think, you know, when I look at the racism machine in our society, I almost think of it as the good, the bad, the ugly. So, you know, with the ugly, you have the cartoon racists, the Donald Trumps. With the good, you have civil rights legislation, you have moments of shared wokeness, you have our first Black president, various efforts by organizations, the way pop culture slowly moves forward. The problem with the bad is that both the ugly and the good can be distractions. When we look at cartoon racism, we think of that being the problem. We don't think of the problem being in all of us. And when we look at the good, as Marcia, you mentioned, and what Eric has talked about so eloquently, is the notion that we can be distracted by this idea that we live in a post-racial society, or that, hey, look at all these advances we've made, so, you know, we're not racist, we can move on. I think that what we have to make people realize is that so many of us, without even realizing it, are seeing the world through the dominant American cultural lens. And it's so hard for people not to assess their culture and other cultures without getting outside of their cultural standards, especially when they're the majority culture standards. This is part of what traps people in these racist ideas. So I would say that, you know, we have to not be distracted and focus on how we can become more self-aware. And one thing I'll say is that when we do have these moments of collective wokeness, as happened with George Floyd, where our compassion gene is so heavily triggered, we have to think about how do we leverage those moments so it's not just you know, the flavor of the week and we move on to the next thing.
We have to wrap up now, and I want to thank all of our esteemed panelists for your input into this conversation. And what we're learning is that we have to utilize all the tools that we have, all the prestige that we have, and all the leverage that we have in society to make this place a better world, you know, for all of us and for our fellow citizens, and that we have to be willing to get into the belly of the beast. You know, I grew up in the South Side of Chicago, and we used to sell wolf tickets. In other words, we would talk ish 5 blocks to my friend, right? But this particular time in history calls us to be like Dr. King, our heated breath, not our breath only, but our actions and our non-victimization to push society forward. Angel, thank you very much. Angel,
Yes.
and Erin and Debra,
Yes.
and Adam, thank you for your input. And we're going to go to the next section. This conversation has started.
Can I add a thank you to everyone? And just as you said with Dr. King, there's one thing we can all do in addition to wearing our masks.
Woohoo!
We can definitely vote. Our vote has value. It has capital human value in the place called our governance. So use that capital, right? And that's getting it started. So thank you all so very much, and have a great day. Stay tuned and participate in the other dynamic sessions that are following this opening. Have a great day.